Welcome to This Week in Heresy, episode 46, The Fivefold Goddess, with our guest via Skype, Lasara Firefox Allen. Hey, Lasara, welcome to This Week in Heresy.
Thank you. I'm super pleased to be here.
So, can you let people know a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I am Lasara Firefox Allen. I wrote Sexy Witch. It was published through Llewellyn in 2005, and I wrote that under the pen. Well, my name at the time was Lasara Firefox. So many in the pagan and alternative communities know me as Lasara Firefox. I worked under that name for a number of years, and then I got married and surprisingly took my husband's last name, which I never thought I would do. That's a long story of its own. I went to the Middle East and had my head really turned around about some stuff. And I came back and I was like, okay, I can, that's okay. I can do some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. It was really, a very interesting chapter in my life that I love talking about, but it's not totally on topic today. So I'll minimize it. So I wrote Sexy Witch in 2005. And then I kept working through that whole time period. And I had kids and who were little when I wrote Sexy Witch, and Sexy Witch was hugely time consuming and destabilized my, promoting my book and going out on tour and stuff. That whole experience destabilized my family to a pretty large extent. And so I kind of, after that intense push was over, I decided to pull it back for a while. And it took me until now, like 10 years later, to write my second follow-up book with Llewellyn, which is, the working title is The Fivefold Goddess. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. But I self-published a book of poems in between in 2012, which is called The Pussy Poems. And it's all about my pussy and sex, and but mostly just about the anatomy, of my experience of my own anatomy. And I wrote it because of the Vaginagate scandal that happened in 2012 with the woman speaker who was censured on the House floor or the Senate floor for saying the word vagina.
Oh, right. I remember that. Yeah. God, that was ridiculous.
Crazy. I was like away in the woods when that happened. I came back and I hadn't been online for like 5 days. I got online and I was like, what? Oh my God, what is even happening? and those poems I wrote when I was writing Sexy Witch out of some of the exercises that I was doing to work with the material. And I was like, okay, I'd performed them many times over the years, like intervening. And I was like, okay. So I, did a crowdsourcing thing, and I raised enough money to do a print run of 500 chapbooks of that collection. So I published that in 2012, and then I've been publishing a number of anthologies on a number of different topics, from like Magic on the Edge with Elwood, and then most recently Bringing Race to the Table with Crystal Blanton.
Yep.
So I have a lot of topics. Most of them are out on the edges. I'm not so much in the pagan, there's, as there is a lot of sort of fracture that happens within the movement and this community or sect and that community or sect, or this trad branching off or what have you. And I don't even track that stuff.
Oh, I know.
Until it lands in my court. And what I mean by that is if it's racist, if it's transphobic, if it's anti-feminist, like those are the arguments that I'll get into.
Right.
Are worth my time. So,
exactly. Right. Well, that's, right. I mean, my whole podcast is kind of doing that. So,
right. So, the rest of the stuff, I don't really pay attention. I actually left the pagan community for a number of years. I grew up in the pagan community. I left the pagan community after Sexy Witch. That also is a long, long story, which we don't need to go into entirely. But I took some time off and finally came back PantheaCon, not this year, but the year before. was my like first re-entry back into the larger pagan community. I never stopped practicing, but I also went to the Middle East and had a conversion experience and like studied Islam. And so, my own spiritual mystical process was enriched by my departure from paganism. And then, coming back to it with more of a panentheist attitude than a pantheist attitude. And, for your listeners, the distinction is pantheist is like everything is God. And panentheist means everything is God within God. Mm-hmm. So there's, and I use God, as the gender neutral term. I think God, the entity that is the all powerful, that exists beyond and within all of us, is beyond gender attributions and beyond our, interpretations. So even though I use the word goddess in my work with women, because I think it's important that we individually reclaim that identity. When I'm thinking about my own spiritual process, I often use the word God as a gender neutral term.
Yeah, I mean, I do that too, and I also consider myself a panentheist as well. Not everybody's cup of tea, but it works for me, and it works for my multi-faith stuff. It works for, my practice. It's all good.
Right. It's a perfect, I've been looking for the right word for a long time, and there are a number of words that almost fit, but that so far that's the one that is the most accurate for my own belief structures.
Yeah, for me it was kind of like that moment, like, oh, there's a word for this. Wow.
Right, absolutely. So that's a bit about me. I have 2 kids who are amazing. My 18-year-old is graduating in 2 weeks, and my 15-year-old is an amazing gender rejectionist trans kid who has I like to think of it as that my younger kid has taken all of my gender identity stuff that I had going on when I was younger and carried it to its natural conclusion. If I would have taken, I could have easily gone down that route and not had kids and done the momming thing and stuff. Not that they're mutually exclusive, but in the 90s, there wasn't quite so much fluidity around all that. You kind of, and there's still a lot of pressure, I think, in some cases to kind of choose one or the other. There are very few people who are kind of really inhabiting that middle ground. Our kids are doing that. Our kids, they are crazy, brave, pansexual, queer weirdo kids who are so awesome and brave and courageous and just brilliant and beautiful. They're doing that. They're living in that liminal. And I respect the heck out of it. It's not the easiest work they could have taken on, but it sure is beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. And, it's been really interesting for me. And I've asked a lot of people about this in my interviews is, what do they see about the youth? And, and what it really comes down to is that they're not afraid of the other as we were. And, it's like they're looking at all the racism stuff and all the gender issues and the LGBT issues and all that stuff. And it's like, we don't get it. Why are you so hard up about this?
Right. Well, and some of that, I know that some of that is total evolution, and then some of that is privilege that we need to, kind of, dismantle a little bit, because there is some of that kind of, Western privilege in there, so it's as momming 2 kids who are both really different, and my older kid who is, a strong feminist and came out as a strong feminist, she's 18. She really had her transition, her radicalization probably 3 or 4 years ago, but she's strong. She's strong in it. My younger kid doesn't identify as is a feminist, but doesn't identify as feminist. Just last night on the way home, my younger kids in a play right now, and actually they're playing Thisbe in A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is hilarious. So, play with the gender stuff a little bit more up there on stage. And they think it's funny too. So everybody thinks it's funny. And on the way home, we were talking about their relationship prospects and whatnot. And my kid was like, yeah, well, I was talking about so-and-so with some of my cast members beforehand and before the play. And I had an opportunity to educate them about consent. And I was like, yes.
Nice.
So, even though my younger kid doesn't think of themselves as a political voice or as a radicalized person, they really are. I mean, they're living in their gender identity as radical. Educating people about consent is radical, so they're, So
go mom.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. It's super sweet. And still those moments where the unexamined comes up, it's my responsibility as a mama to be like, okay, let's unpack that one a little bit, and we live in a very white, rural area with not a lot of diversity, and the diversity that is here is super stratified. Mm-hmm. So we have, there's a large Native American population. There's a large Chicano population, a large migrant population. And the migrant population here is not like other places. We have a migrant population that is related to, marijuana cultivation. So that migrant population is like young homeless kids who are mostly white, from, kind of whatever backgrounds, all kinds of backgrounds. Some of them are loaded and some of them have more money, in their bank account than I ever do. And then they come work for 3 months and then they go to Europe or Peru for, the next 9 months and come back and work again. So our migrant population here is totally different than, and then we have the poor migrant population who come in and do the farm work and, so because we are an ag area. So yeah, we have diversity here. It's just a different kind of diversity. And there's not a lot of consistent diversity as far as, racial and ethnic, identity more than anything. And like I said, what there is here is really stratified. And if you want to and even the homeless, we have a pretty established homeless population, but we have a lot of really horrible draconian laws that keep homeless people pretty much invisible, just like a lot of places.
Right.
So if you want to hang out with the homeless people, you have to figure out where they're camping. I do this, figure out where they're camping, bring food, hang out. How you doing? It takes effort, to get into those spheres that you aren't automatically in this area, because we are very rural. Like I said, we're spread out. Like the community, it's not like you have this neighborhood and that neighborhood and that neighborhood. You have like this town and that town, and they're like 30 miles apart.
Yeah, and speaking of diversity, I was reading. You had sent me some of your book to read there. Yeah. And it seems like you've really taken in aspects of diversity and really molded your Fivefold Goddess idea around that. And I was really impressed because, like, I'll admit, because I was like, I didn't know you before people suggested to interview you. So I was like, oh, goddess thing. What? Uh-oh. Because, my experience is doing the gender work that our coven has done over the years. It was just like,
I know.
There's like, eek. And then I started reading it and I was just like,
I totally get it.
Okay, this is kind of shiny. Let's see where this goes.
That's good feedback too. I just had my big conversation with my acquisitions editor yesterday, which was for like 2.5 hours. So she wants me to do a considerable amount of restructuring around the book. She's like, this is not a beginner's book. I want you to think about this as, an advanced book. Advanced practitioners are going to be reading this book. Beginners aren't so much going to be reading this book. And I was like, well, it depends on how well I market it. And yes, I get your point. So we are going to work to not alienate beginning readers, and I'm going to go through and revamp everything so that it reads as an advanced, like a 401 instead of a 101.
Right.
And we're changing the title. My editor was like, I don't want people thinking this is a goddess book, because that's not what it is.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I got tripped up on it, but, reading it, I was just like, this is a really cool idea. And so, can you describe for folks, like, what the Fivefold Goddess is and, some of the history of how you got to this idea?
Absolutely. So, the Fivefold Goddess. So I want to start from what it's not.
Okay.
Just because that's how I got there.
Okay.
So,
awesome.
It's with many of us who grew up in paganism. I grew up with the threefold model. So the Maiden, Mother, Crone archetypal system was what I grew up with. It's like ever present in all of the branches of paganism that I've participated in, really. But I haven't participated in all the branches of paganism, so I'm not saying it's everywhere. I'm just saying it's everywhere that I've been. Mm-hmm. And year after year, I got more and more. So when I was younger, like people be like, "Oh, I'm casting a circle. Will you call fire?" Like fire. People. I was like, "Why can't I call Earth ever? Like, why won't you give me water ever? No, you're fire. Just go be fire." Okay. And at the same time, people be like, "I need a warrior goddess, Lasara. You're the warrior goddess." And I'm like, why can't I be, can I be the maiden god? Can I be the mother goddess? So I never, even in other people's perception of me, I never easily fell into the threefold model.
Right.
I was outside of it even after I had kids.
Right.
I still wasn't in the mother archetype. And I will say, from my own self, I have kids and I love being a mom. I love the fact that I'm a mom. I love my kids. They're awesome. I'm totally amazed by them and proud of them and love interacting with them. Mm-hmm. And I don't identify as a mom. Right. Momming is one of the things that I do. Mm-hmm. It's one of the aspects of who I am, but I'm not a mom. Right. Like some people are moms, and so and I think to some extent that's why people also were like, oh, well, sure, you're 9 months pregnant. I was ordained when I was 9 months pregnant.
Nice.
So literally days before my kid was due, and they're like, well, I guess you can represent the mom now, for a minute. So, but not really, because I was actually doing my challenge initiation ritual, and I actually was the fool in the tarot. So I was a very pregnant fool. So, which again is, when we look at the fivefold model, that the fool and the warrior both fall into the potens, the potens phase of the Fivefold Goddess, which we'll get to in a minute. Mm-hmm. So some of it was my experience of never really feeling settled into that. And, I'm a pretty hardcore politico. I'm a strong feminist, stronger than most people, maybe stronger than I need to be at times, but it's what I am. It's what I do. So I do a lot of deconstruction of our social norms, regardless of where we are. I'm constantly looking and saying, okay, how is this thing reifying our ideas about womanhood? How is this thing reifying our ideas about femininity? How is this thing reifying, all of those elements where I'm examining because everything's doing that. So I want to know how is it doing? And then I want to figure out how it can be done differently so that we can have a different outcome, so that we can have more resourcefulness and more resilience and more options for our young people and for ourselves too, So all that plays in. In addition, I have a lot of family who's queer. I mean, I identify as queer. I have a lot of family who's queerer than I am, you know, and who identify, like I have family members who identify as female and present very male. And even though they have mothered children, you know, they're so butch. They don't fall into that flow necessarily. And then, you know, a lot of very butch people in my life who also, it's like, you know, just not, they don't fall into that category. I have a bunch of friends who are women who have not had children and don't want to have children. I have friends who are women and can't have children. I have friends who are women and don't have uteruses. I have friends because, you know, for a number of reasons, right? I have women friends who went through menopause at 19. I have women friends who weren't born with uteruses. I have, you know, women friends who are trans who, you know, weren't born with uteruses. I have, you know, like cis women who in my life who weren't born with uteruses. Like the ideas that we have about what makes a woman are so limited and flawed. So as I started having the conversations with all of these women, like, how do you feel about this model? They were like, yeah, no, like there's nothing for me there. You know, I don't, you know, so I feel totally isolated within my own tradition. And then, you know, for me, like having the issue of trans exclusionary, you know, branches getting, you know, more vocal. That was really painful for me. And I was like, what are we doing? You know, what are we doing? Like if we out on the like way out edge can't work out how to accept one another, who the heck can? Like, who are we to be talking about, like, right-wing Christians not allowing gay marriage? Like, we're, you know, hello. Like, you know, so.
Right. You know, and it's like, you know, don't you hear yourselves? You know, you're sounding like exactly what you hate.
Right.
And it's like, for me, it always boggled my mind too. And actually, that's part of what spurred my own work in this area. So.
Yeah. Right. So I was like, well, and then, you know, and then people started like a few years ago, people were like, oh, we're going to add in the warrior to the threefold. So there's the maiden, the warrior, the mother, and the crone. Oh, we're going to add in the empress or the queen. So it's the maiden, the warrior, the mother, the queen, the crone. And all of that's interesting. Like I tried that for a minute. I was like, maybe we can do it this way. We can't. And here's why. Here's the why. Here's the central why. The maiden, mother, crone archetypal system is based on biology. You have maiden, which is like not having babies yet. Then you have mother, which is now having babies. Then you have crone, which is no longer having babies. But it's all defined by our uterine cycle, by our biological cycle. And it's so that ties into, and this is very, I understand that this is hidden and I'm not blaming anyone for buying this for this long. Like I get it. It's very complicated, but once you get it, it's not complicated anymore. When we are based in our biological arc like that, when our worth is based in our fertility, our worth is based in utility, because our fertility is about offering our bodies to our community. It's about offering our progeny to our community. It's about the responsibility, or, you know, the gift of the goddess being life from her own flesh, right? And so when our bodies, when the worth of our bodies is based in utility, we don't have sovereignty. We don't have bodily sovereignty.
Right. And that's a huge problem in our society, period, full stop. You know?
Exactly.
And that could be a whole nother interview all by itself.
Absolutely. And so this is the point where when I started really examining into why is this, this fivefold idea not working for me? And it's because I work with bodily sovereignty. That's one of the things that I work with. It's one of the workshops that I do. It's one of the areas that I'm like, I've been doing this work for a few years. I've been doing this work for a long time, but in the last few years, I've been actually formulating workshops around what does it mean to claim our own bodies? What does it mean to claim our own space around us? Like, what is sovereignty? What is bodily, physical sovereignty? So yeah, the threefold model is patriarchal. It's a patriarchal model because it's about the utility of a woman's body to her tribe. So the fivefold model is unrelated to the threefold model. Mm-hmm. It is a complete reset. So it's a reset and start over. So we're working with Latin terms for the 5 phases. They are not biologically ordained. They're not tied to our biological process. You can see them as a linear arc, but they also have non-linear application. Mm-hmm. And so basically it's femella, which is the child. And, in the book and the workshop that I'm offering, there is a lot to this. The child, reclaiming the child, the divine child as a female archetype is a huge deal. We don't have that culturally. Only boys are allowed to be boys and girls aren't allowed to be girls. Girls are, ladies in waiting, like we're in potential, like that's, so the girl as the child, not as the maiden, but as the child. Mm-hmm. Then we have potens. Potens is like, if you're looking at it in the actual, like, progressive linear arc, potens might be, depending on the person. And this is another thing, it's self-defining. It's not like when you start bleeding, you are this, or when you have a baby, you are this, but actually the person gets to define when that transition point is. So when a person might transition into potens, they might be 13 and be like, I'm a young person who's going to, start my own campaign for blah, blah, blah. And they might be stepping into potens at that point. They might be 17 and, moving out of their parents' home. They might be 18 and graduating and moving to college. So potens is all those things. And the elements where potens comes in, where we can think of it and like I feel it in my body, is like the first time I left on an international trip on my own. Mm-hmm. That was very potens. So potens is like a lover and a fighter. She's the fool. She's all of those elements of like striking out and moving forward. So she's strength and potential. Then we have creatrix. And the reason I use the word creatrix instead of matrix or genetrix, which are both beautiful words too, is matrix and genetrix both have to do with biological function. Creatrix does not. It includes biological function. You can be a physical mother and be in matrix, but you can also be a painter. You can also be a writer. You can also be a crafter. You can also be a singer. We create, as I said, in that chapter, like the goddess creates in innumerable ways, and women do too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So creatrix is that full exploration and experience of what is the creative process in me. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth is sapientia. And sapientia in Latin, the Latin terms are really beautiful because they're more complex than the English terms too. So sapientia actually means wise woman, but it also means like woman of science and woman of art and woman of memory. So she's the one who's like distilled it down into a system and she's ready to offer it back. Mm-hmm. She's the teacher. She's the, priestess. She's the CEO or the CFO or the CCO,
Right.
She's the, and she's also the judge, and she's the mathematician, she's all of those things, right. Of that level of getting to you are now, she's the master of her art.
Yeah. The level of mastery. Yeah.
Exactly. And in most cases that will show up as either being in service to her community. If she's a scientist, she's in research and she's serving her community in that way, or being a leader, a community leader or a teacher, or in some way offering back the information that she's, developed and held to her. She is now, bringing out into the world through her, stature, that there's that developmental level. Then the fifth is Antiqua. And Antiqua means old woman. That's what it means, old woman. And so, and I like the idea of breaking down, the sapientia and the old woman, right? Instead of we have, Crone, we have the wise woman, and then we have the old woman. Not that they're not both at the same time,
right? But
sometimes the old woman is just an old woman. And there's a place in us, in me, in our bodies, that I think it's important that we recognize that sense that if we're lucky, that we will live to be old women, and that will change how we are in our communities and in our lives. And, my mom's an old, she's verging on old womanhood. She's turning 78, so there's, the transitional points of recognizing where she needs more help. And not just my mom, I'm using her as an example, but women in our community, the women who are our, our teachers, and the women we grew up, learning from. These women are becoming old women. And how do we take care of that transition? How do we serve these women and care for them in a way that's going to benefit them and benefit the community?
Right.
So those are the five faces of the Fivefold Goddess in a linear context. The way that it's nonlinear is, say that, okay, so I used Malala Yousafzai as an example of sapientia in a young person.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So, and in Potens, I used an example of these two amazing bodybuilders, these women who are both over 70 and are competition level bodybuilders who started training in their 50s.
Wow.
Right.
Right.
And so they're very much potents. They're in their physical glory. They're strong, and they're both Black women, which I think is also just amazing. Just awesome. I was like, whoa, what? There's this whole, they aren't the only two either. It's a trip. So I was like, it's so cool. Like, look at that. And, so we have this nonlinear sense of like, we know as people, I think as people, as women, we go through these phases, we walk into these again and again, and you can be in more than one at a time. So like, say you're in creatrix in your family and you're in sapientia in your work. Say you're in creatrix in your family and you're in potens in a new love relationship.
Right. I mean, I could see that even for my own self, because, I graduated last year from seminary, and that, and I was in potens while I was in seminary, and now I'm phasing into creatrix again, which is interesting because I was really kind of in sapientia into Antiqua in my old profession, which was biotech. Yeah. So it's interesting to see the cyclical nature of that. And the other thought I had while you were describing them is that, and this is going to sound, I don't know how this is going to play out, but this would actually, for men specifically, this I think could help them relate to goddess form better.
Absolutely.
Because, men who really want to know goddess can't really relate to the uterine model, basically.
Yeah, right. And that's for men. I just put a post on my Facebook yesterday, actually. I'm like doing reasons you would want to take this course. Men who are in relationship with women in whatever way and want to understand women from that perspective will get a lot out of this course and this book. And then also men who are wanting to explore the feminine divine or feminal divine within themselves are going to have an opportunity to really internalize what, that more less static, more natural, I'm saying more natural flow, because as women, we are required almost to flow amongst these different phases at different points. So, for the men who take this course, it will be a very, I think, a very revelatory experience for the women too, in different ways maybe, but in similar ways. And I do think that overall, I mean, not to toot my own horn, but I've had a number of people say that, this concept, that the book, the workshops, have the potential to create a shift in how paganism views the goddess. And, I hope so. I hope that that's true.
What would you say to women who would be like, but what about our menstrual cycles? Because that was important for me. This was important for me. That that transition
absolutely
was important.
Yeah, I am absolutely 100% in favor of people honoring whatever kind of rites of passage they want to. That includes blood rites. And I have a lot of information in there. I'm actually going to, in the restructure, I'm going to be giving that more attention, how to create a rite of passage that's consensual. Because that's, one of the issues.
Yeah.
I'm like, I really want my magical experiences to be entirely consensual. I don't like watching people get rite of passaged.
Right.
So part of it is like, does your kid want a rite of passage around their blood? My younger kid would have been mortified. They're trans. Like getting their blood was like the most traumatic thing they had maybe ever experienced.
Right.
So you can't just assume that a kid is going to want that rite of passage. Right. So, and you can't assume that a woman is going to want a rite of passage into like the assumptions that there are these rites of passage that we all need to do is, I think, a flawed thing. So what I offer on rites of passage in this book, in the Fivefold Goddess, or whatever it's going to be called at this point, we call it something else, something other than that, is kind of like how do you do this consensually? How do you create a rite of passage for or with someone, with their enrollment, with their input, with their consent? And I have a very clear model for getting consent and or finding out whether you have consent, and if not, how to ask if there's something else that might be possible for you, So I highly encourage people ritualizing whatever rites of passage they want to. And if a blood rite is one of the ones that they want to recognize, I encourage them to. What I encourage, the way that I would like to see that happen, is not as a transitional point from one phase to another, but as a celebration of femella. Right? That our bodies can change and we can still maintain our childish innocence, our childhood innocence.
Right.
That just because our bodies are changing doesn't mean that all of a sudden we need to be mothers, which is like to me, one of the really unexamined areas is like, if you're talking about going from maiden, which is pre-menarche, to mother, which is post-menarche, you're talking about giving the title of mother to like 8-year-olds sometimes.
Yeah. And it's happened, and menstruation is happening earlier and earlier in people.
Right. My kids in their teens, but some people it's 8 or 9 years old. So, and to me, it's just some deconstruction that we need to do. Like it wasn't, 3-4 generations ago, you start bleeding. What I say in the book is like the message that we're sending when we create a rite of passage around a blood rite that says you are now becoming this other stage of who you are, right? That you're going from now you're a grown up all of a sudden, right? We're basically saying old enough to bleed, old enough to breed. And I don't think we want to be saying that.
Well,
I personally don't want to be saying.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't want to tell a kid that.
Right.
Honestly.
But it's the message that we're sending when we do a transitional ritual that's like about becoming a grown up just because you started bleeding.
Right. And, you know, and it seems to me like there are people, and I will particularly say second waivers that I've experienced discussions with that are really clinging to this notion of that, you know, like that, you know, while I mean, I consider it an important change in a cisgendered girl's life if they continue to be cisgendered, and that's important to them. It's, you know, it just seems to defeat the purpose of feminism as it started. You know, the whole point of feminism to me was like, oh, we are more than our biological function. Yeah. And it's like when I see these groups that are like trying to be all radical and being like, oh, we're changing patriarchy, we're changing this, we're changing that. And then it's like, and then basing the entire thing on our bodies when we're supposed to be more than our bodies. It's like, excuse you?
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And yeah. And, you know, excellent, you know, have blood rights if you want them, and, you know, have blood circles if you want them, and, you know that that's not going to be a rite of passage that all of us get to participate in. Mm-hmm. Like a lot of us aren't going to be able to have that. And so we're going to need other ways that we can have our rites of passage. So, mm-hmm. you know, a friend of mine I was talking with when I was writing, you know, that section, her kid is little, right? Very little, like, you know, 5. Right. And we were talking about like rites of passage, like making a contract about allowing the kid to have scissors in their room. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. That's a rite of passage. Yeah. You know, with enough consciousness, you can look at these areas where you're like, okay, you're going through a rite of passage right now. Mm-hmm. You know, we're creating a contract. We're getting you your own scissors. Mm-hmm. You know, that's a rite of passage, and you can ritualize it to whatever extent feels comfortable for you and the kid, you know. Yeah. But there are so many little things that are rites of passage that mm-hmm. can be recognized. And one of the things that I mentioned for specifically for trans women is the idea of like the day you took your name, the day you started going by your new name. Like that's a rite of passage. It's a brilliant rite of passage, you know. The day you first started completely dressing your gender, you know, that was a rite of passage, you know. So those or is or will be, you know, so that we can have these I have one friend who was reading who said, I'm totally going back on my timeline and I'm dedicating that day, you know, to Mela. So, you know, yeah.
Well, I've seen that too, because I have several friends and coven mates, you know, had similar things. And it's like, yes, that is an important rite of passage for you. But, you know, again, you know, it also goes back to consent because, you know, some people I know who are trans are like, listen, that was the day. Yeah. And that's it. I don't really care to celebrate it anymore.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Which is why consent is like, so important.
Right.
Yeah. Why do you that goes throughout. Like I definitely talk about like consent with Antiqua too, because a lot of us try to help our elders. We help to them. We help at them.
Right, right.
You know, we don't help with them. We don't ask for their input on how we could best help. We actually just help at them.
Right. Absolutely.
And then we're like, why don't you want my help? Yeah. And they're like, I do want your help, but I want your help to do the thing I want done, not the thing you think is important, you know? Right. So, you know.
Well, it's listening and listening with compassion and being like, okay, how can I help you that will make you feel good and make things good for you?
Right. And it has to do with respect. That's what it, across the board, like respect your kid, respect your family, respect your elders, respect yourself, like just respect everybody, and consent comes from there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it also brings about inclusion.
Yeah.
Because, the Maiden Mother Crone, just by its fundamental makeup, is exclusionary.
Yes.
And, if we are to be a group as under the pagan umbrella that is that are claiming to be inclusionary,
right,
then we really need to like you're doing in your book, we really need to examine this lore. And while, sometimes the lore works for people, that's great, fantastic, go with your bad self. But it does need examination.
Yeah.
And it does need critical reflection.
Absolutely. And so to break that out a little bit, because I know exactly what you're saying, but you've read some of the book and your readers haven't. So
right.
To break that out a little bit, the model is exclusionary because it's based in biology. And so because the Maiden Mother Crone archetypal system is based in biology, and the uterus as the specific focus, again, it leaves out anyone who doesn't either abide by the arc of Maiden Mother Crone or anyone who doesn't have a uterus, which again goes back to the radical exclusionary part, which is like, if you don't bleed, if you've never bled, you aren't a woman. That's, that is the definition within that radical sect, which is so hurtful, like so incredibly, I feel I have been injured myself by that category of people. I mean, the worst dress down I got about supporting my trans kid was from a radical Dianic. Wow. Not from a hick out here, not from a redneck, not from a, Bible toter. No. Mm-hmm. From a trans exclusionary radical feminist pagan Wiccan Dianic person. Wow. The worst tongue lashing, the absolutely worst interaction I have ever had. And I was like, really? This is crazy. This is crazy. I live in the middle of nowhere and I have not had this interaction with anyone. I come to PantheaCon and I get to have this interaction. Right. Awesome. So yeah. And I'm not, and I'm just talking about supporting my trans kid. I'm not even the primary target. I'm the secondary target, mm-hmm. And so like, it's just so hurtful. It's so hurtful and harmful, mm-hmm. And yes, if we are a religion, a spiritual path, a spiritual confluence that is claiming inclusivity, yes, we do need to examine the areas in which we are falling into patriarchal models. Mm-hmm. And the Maiden Mother Crone is a patriarchal model. Right. And, and then also this also has so much intersectionality too. Yes. Because, race plays into this, gender, class. I mean, yes. You can fold in everything with this, yes. with this problem. Yeah. And I do address a lot of that in the book. I definitely, my largest desire with this book, The Fivefold Goddess, which is going to be called something like Liberating the Goddess, maybe, mm-hmm. or something along those lines. Oh, I kind of like that. I know, I liked it too. We're still working on it though. Jailbreaking the Goddess was my favorite, but I don't think that Llewellyn's going to buy that one. I love it though. I think Jailbreaking the Goddess is the greatest title. That is kind of cool. I like that one. Right? That's my personal favorite. I'll keep that in my head. I know. So good. It's so funny. I think it's a totally hilarious title, but not to sidetrack too much. So in this book, my core desire was to disassemble patriarchal assumptions while creating the most expansive sense of inclusivity that I could. And so I did truly attempt, from my limited perspective, to be as intersectionally aware throughout the book as possible.
That's really awesome because like you don't always see that in a lot of pagan literature. And
absolutely.
That's a whole nother problem that could probably be an interview by itself as well.
Right. Absolutely. But it is definitely one of the foci of this book.
So you are teaching as well, as working on the book, along with working on the book, you are also teaching courses about the Fivefold Goddess. And so what does that include and, when is it happening?
Yeah. Okay. So the first ever course on the Fivefold model is starting June 2nd, which is really soon. And it is gender inclusive, all genders welcome. That was a transition. It initially started out as being a group for self-identified women, all women. But then, a request was made that that be expanded. And so I did, and I'm very happy with that choice. And it's 7 sessions. It's web-based, so it's from wherever you are. It's 7 sessions, Tuesday evenings, so 7 weeks in a row. And 7 Tuesdays in a row. And between those, and that will be like a web-based classroom. So we'll be able to have face-to-face time for anyone who's into that. It's totally not required. You don't have to do that part if it's not something that is, something that you like to do. I know I have one kid who's an introvert, and so I've had to learn that some people don't want that kind of intensity. So whatever your comfort level is, that's where you get to be. So because in addition to the weekly course or the weekly meeting, which will be recorded and you can watch it on your own time if you don't want to interact that way, we have like a classroom environment, which is really just a secret hidden group on Facebook, because that's the easiest format for a lot of people right now. And it's worked really successfully for me. I can stay very engaged there. I'm very interactive in the classroom. I respond to everybody. If someone has a specific question for me to answer, I'm on it very quickly. I can also team you up with a buddy, so that you have someone who you can be like, oh, this thing came up for me and I want some help. I need a sounding board, or, wow, this thing was amazing. What was it like for you? So you have someone to like ground your process with if you want that. If you need one-on-one check-ins with me, we can do that. So it's a very supportive environment. And I'll also be offering a recorded ritual to do with each of her faces, each of her aspects. So you have the once a week group meeting. You have a classroom that we're interactive in every day. I love it when people do just even a line of daily check-in about their process. And I do that as well. And then for the 5 weeks that we're looking at her 5 faces, or 5 aspects, we are going to be having a ritual a week that will be a recorded track that you can then do the ritual as I speak you through the ritual. And trying to think if there's anything else that is included there. I think that's pretty comprehensively how it goes. There are some bonuses on the sign-up page. My website's down right now, but hopefully it'll be up by tonight. So there are bonuses. There is a registration page on Facebook, which can be accessed right now, of course. And I think the bonuses are listed there as well.
Yeah, we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Yeah,
excellent. So I also have a little YouTube I have this cold, so like I look totally thrashed out in the video, but whatever. So I have a little 10-minute video that I did about the Fivefold Goddess that's available on YouTube on my channel there.
Is there a cost associated with the course, and is it sliding scale or anything? So like if somebody really wanted to take it but had limited funds?
Yes, there are multiple options. There is a sliding scale cost. The sliding scale is $299 to $399. And it's broken down by your income category. And I have lower income, middle income, and upper income categories. And you figure out which one of those, and they're national standards. So you figure which one you fall into, and then you decide, if you can make that payment. That's what I ask, because I just really ask that people do, value my time with compensation, which is hard to ask sometimes, because I know that we all, I have classes I want to take right now too, and I can't afford, and I'm like, oh, can I do it? What do I do? And but I don't want to ask any teachers to lower their rates, because I know that all of us are already teaching at our bottom line.
Right.
Oh, so that is my bottom line. However, there are things that we can do. We can do a payment plan. I can do an individualized payment plan for you. Like, I have people who are paying me $50 a month until they're paid up to their marcation. I have people who are paying in 3 installments or 4 installments. Like, so whatever, hopefully there's some way that like $50 a month would be okay for you. If that were not going to be okay with you, we could talk about making an even lower payment plan, where hopefully if I could drop it down to $25 a month, hopefully that would be okay. It would be a longer payment plan, but ultimately it would end up working out. And if someone's like, I really want to take the course and I just cannot afford any money at all, they should get in touch with me, and they should tell me why they want to take the course, why they can't pay for it, and what they want to do instead. Because I'm not going to ignore people. I will listen to every single person who says, I really want this in my life, and here's why I can't do it the way that it's set up. Definitely. And just so people know, like, I'm very philanthropic about this stuff. I already have given many seats out to people who couldn't afford them. So kind of, my scholarship fund, which is just really me not getting paid.
Right.
My scholarship fund. It's where I say, okay, I'm not going to make this much money. Those slots are filled at this point.
Okay. But that's cool. And we'll have all that information in the show notes as well. So, and email address to get in touch with you. So that way, people can ask you about how to do this and everything. And since we're kind of nearing the end of our time, when do you expect the book to be coming out?
So I just got my publication date is summer of 2016.
Okay.
So going to be done with my next round of edits in early August, and that will allow the 9 months they need to get it from this pile of papers into an actual book.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yay. Well, then, if you want to do another, discussion of it then, and just talk about some of the evolution, then we could certainly do that around the release date.
Sure. That would be super fun. For sure. And also, just so people know, I am offering bonuses of the book to some people who sign up. And one thing that I should mention right now is I have a fundraiser, which is a crowdsourcing platform fundraiser. Mm-hmm. It's FUNDRAZR. I really like it. It's a great platform. I have a fundraiser up right now that is to finance my next 2 months while I do the edits. And there are some amazing bonuses that are super fun and funky. And then also, if you want to register for the class today or tomorrow or through Tuesday, you can register there, and you'll get extra bonuses if you do that.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, we'll have all that in the show notes, and then also, they can email you. We'll have that in the show notes as well. And so this has been really interesting, and I look forward to seeing the finished product and to reading more. I'm probably going to sneak a peek in my copy because I didn't get to finish it. So
yeah, well, it will be substantially different next time you read it.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and it's been a great conversation. So, and like I said, we'll have all that information in the show notes. So, it's been great. Thank you.
It has been super fun, and I look forward to it again. Just let's stay in touch and do it. We can do it sooner than later. I love being on your show. Yay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Have a good one.
I'd like to thank Lasara for joining us this week. As always, if you have comments, questions, or would like to read the show notes, you can go to thisweekinheresy.com. You can support This Week in Heresy by subscribing to the show via iTunes or the Stitcher app, following us on Twitter at TWIH Podcast, or financially through Patreon. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.